The Omega Speedmaster makes me feel conflicted. It might be my favorite watch in my collection, and yet I don't think you should buy one. I've owned mine for over 2 years, and I don't regret it. But based on what you're getting for your money, the Speedmaster doesn't make much sense to own at the moment. And to explain why, I'm finally giving it an honest owner's review, and breaking down the main reasons you might want to consider something else. Nearly any watch, including the Speedmaster, can be broken down into 3 main components: its history, dimensions and specifications, and aesthetics. Usually, I'd start a review with the history, but I think we all know the Speedmasters at this point, so I'll save that for later. Just know that the current iteration, the 3861, released in 2021, is the model I'm covering. So let's begin with its specifications and measurements, which are misleading. Despite the listed 42mm diameter, the Speedmaster's bezel measures in at 40mm, making it wear closer to a typical 40 or 41mm watch, which my perceived diameter equation agrees with when you plug in its dimensions. 40mm diameter, 47.5mm lug to lug, and 13.2 or 13.5mm thick for the sapphire and hezolite versions respectively. On a 56mm wide and 16cm circumference wrist, it wears large but well. Generally, people are surprised with how well it wears given its dimensions, which is largely thanks to its design that I'll cover in a bit. Inside, it has a manually wound movement that's enjoyable to wind, but let down because of how bothersome it is to pop out of the crown due to the crown guards, which is only exacerbated by its relatively short 50-hour power reserve. Of course, it's a 3-register chronograph with a lateral clutch, silicon bound spring, and coaxial escapement, all beating at 3 Hz with a MEDAS certification. If you look at these specs on paper, they're really not that impressive for the price. Of course, MEDAS certification is great, and the coaxial escapement supposedly increases service intervals. But beyond that, a 3 Hz lateral clutch chrono with 50 hours of power reserve is below average if anything, especially for the nearly 10 grand price of the Sapphire Sandwich. Take Tudor's recently announced 30mm Black Bay chrono for example. It's under $7,000 and has a 4 Hz movement with a vertical clutch, column wheel, 70 hours of power reserve, and a silicon bound spring as well. It's also in a thinner case, despite being an automatic and having 4 times the water resistance. Admittedly, the Speedmaster has an hour totalizer and the Tudor doesn't, which is probably its biggest outlier advantage in specifications for its price, besides its accuracy. The Speedmaster, to my knowledge, is the thinnest mechanical chronograph that has an hour subdial under $10,000 on the new market, but not by much. When you look at the specifications of a spread of the industry's most popular chronographs around and below its price, on practically every metric, the Speedmaster is middle of the pack. Really, unless you care about the marginal accuracy of MEDAS over COSC, its specifications are rather disappointing when you consider that the average here includes watches for a third the price that still have similar specs. So based on the dimensions and specifications alone, I'd say there are a ton of better options you can get for cheaper. But of course, you're not buying a list of specs, you're buying a design language and a look of the watch too. So let's move on to that next. I don't think anyone can deny that the Speedmaster has an incredibly iconic design. There's a good reason it stayed relevant and relatively unchanged for so many years, especially the dial. To me, it's the pinnacle of an elevated tool aesthetic. The dial maintains high legibility with its white text and markers on the matte black background, leading to a sense of refinement and restraint. There's more depth to the layout than you'd initially expect as well. The texture and height differences from the center, index ring, and sub-registers all add intrigue to an otherwise flat dial. The tachometer bezel style has become iconic in its own right, and subjectively, I find it to be one of the most aesthetic implementations of it. Its thinness gives it a sleek quality that chronographs with thicker bezels, like the Daytona and Black Bay chronos, simply can't match. Moving out to the case, it's a similar story. The uniqueness to its design makes the Speedmaster stand out among the competition. The flow of the twisted lyre lugs into the case, asymmetrical crown guards, and protruding bezel architecture give the watch a distinct silhouette with, in my opinion, significantly more intrigue than most other popular chronographs. Physically, the Speedmaster's unique and faceted case is its most worthwhile feature. Legendary brands known for their chronographs, such as Rolex, Tag Heuer, and Breitling, all look simplistic in comparison, especially when looking at the side profiles. And as far as comfort goes, I've had no complaints. The Speedmaster 3861 bracelet design is again quite distinct, with great brushing, highly articulating, smooth oval-shaped links, and an amazing taper down to 15mm from 20. The end links are female and articulate completely downwards, which allows the watch to be even more wearable for smaller wrists. The links themselves are among the best in their price bracket. The clasp, on the other hand, is severely lacking. While the pinstripe aesthetic and Omega logo are executed quite well, the adjustability is a big step below most quality offerings at this tier. Having only 2 micro adjust settings on a nearly $10,000 watch is frankly near unacceptable in my opinion, considering how many brands have significantly more settings and quality class at a fraction of the price. Tudor's T-Fit, Rolex's Glide Lock, IWC system, and tons of micro brands are all leagues above what's offered here. Which doesn't make a lot of sense, considering Omega's newly updated Planet Ocean has 6 settings and a divers extension at the same price point as the Speedmaster. It may sound nitpicky, but when you're paying this much for a sports watch on a bracelet, worrying about fit should be out of the question, and it definitely hasn't been for me as my wrist expands throughout the day. Flipping the watch over, the 3861 movement has an attractive layout on display, with what I describe as average finishing in the $10,000 range. The Geneva waves are executed well, and the limited beveling is nice, but when compared to other open back chronographs like Zenith's El Primero, it's clear that it leaves a bit to be desired. Most of the surfaces on the 3861 have a simple circular or straight brushing, and no blued screws either. Still, the open caseback is a welcome addition, and the movement is enjoyable to look at regardless. Now obviously, I skimmed over the elephant in the room earlier when it comes to the Speedmaster. It's history. If you've heard anything about this watch, you'd know it was worn during the Apollo 11 mission, and that Omega loves telling everyone they can that it was the first watch on the moon. Beyond that, it's been worn on various NASA missions, and is one of the only watches qualified by NASA to be used for spaceflight. Since its first introduction in 1957, it's gone through countless variations as well, only adding to its history and lineage. As far as stories go, I don't think there's another watch that has a richer heritage and history than the Speedmaster. While other legendary watches like Zenith's El Primero, Rolex's Submariner or Explorer, and Breitling's Navitimer have their own claims to fame, none of them come close to the cool factor and impactful events the Speedmaster was a part of. While other watches might have better specs or their own unique styles, perhaps the only true unique advantage the Speedmaster has over its competition is its claim to fame. And Omega has clung to that as much as they possibly can. It's also the reason why I think it doesn't make sense to buy one for most people. You're paying for that history, whether you're interested in it or not, and at the end of the day, you can't wear a story. So who would I actually recommend the Speedmaster to? Well, if you look at it all together, at its price point, it's a watch with a distinct, well-executed design, iconic space-centric history, and mediocre specifications and technical stats. If you don't care about its NASA and space heritage, practically any other chronograph is a better value. If you don't need an hour totalizer, there's better options for less money. And if you find the dial design language boring, almost anything is more interesting. You're paying extra to have all those elements in one package. It's a watch that's greater than the sum of its parts, if those parts appeal to you. I'd really only recommend the Speedmaster at its current price to someone that's infatuated with the aesthetic, design, and history above all else, and are willing to compromise on its movement and technical prowess. And even then, it's still better to find one in like new condition for 30 to 40% off. As it stands though, the Speedmaster has got to be one of the most over-recommended watches in the entire industry. I genuinely believe that without the moon landing tax, if a brand like Tag Heuer, Tudor, or a larger micro brand made the Speedmaster, it'd have a new MSRP around what it currently goes for, used. As for alternatives and better options, it depends mostly on what your preferences are. If you like the design of the Speedmaster Professional, but find it too big, look into the Speedmaster Reduced, specifically the reference 3539.50, at around $3,000. It's extremely similar in design, but automatic and smaller in every dimension. Alternatively, the modern coaxial Speedmaster 38 line exists at around $6,000, although they're quite a bit thicker than the Professional. If you're just looking for a smaller chronograph with tons of heritage, Zenith's El Primero, specifically the previous generation, is a great option. If price is a concern, Baltic's Scalegraph is an alternative manual winding chronograph with an attractive design, extremely similar sizing, an hour totalizer, larger power reserve, higher water resistance, and more micro adjust for less than $2,000 new. And if you're just looking for a solid chronograph with nice sizing, look into Tag Heuer's Carrera Glassbox, Honhardt's 417, Ferrer's Racing Chronograph, or Damasco's DC56. All of which are significantly more affordable than the Speedmaster with comparable specifications. If there's anything the Speedmaster is known for besides its history, it's how many different references and versions it has. Even though they all share a similar case shape and dial layout, it's surprising how dissimilar they can be. My favorite obscure Speedmaster model that displays this quite well has got to be the reference 3575.20. Released in the early 2000s and technically a Speedmaster Professional, the 3575.20 runs on a modified version of the previous generation's manually wound 1861 movement that had a moon phase and date module attached to it. This gives way to a non-traditional 4-dial and lower text layout as opposed to the typical 3. Aesthetically, this watch leans a bit more bold than the original Speedmaster. It has an off-white dial, applied indices, and broad arrow hands similar to the Speedmaster 57s, all of which are heat blued steel, which creates an attractive color palette. The moon phase disc and bezel are both 18 karat gold, which matches the white dial nicely and gives a dressier look. Considering this is a unique Speedmaster Professional with a white gold bezel, moon phase, and sapphire crystal, it's actually fairly affordable at around $5,000 on the used market. They're uncommon, but still accessible to find if you're interested in getting one. If the added thickness of the moon phase and older movement don't bother you, this is certainly a worthy and interesting alternative to the classic Speedmaster at a lower price. If there's anything you take away from this video, don't let it be that the Speedmaster is a bad watch, because it's not. Honestly, it's a great watch that's overpriced. Its issue is that it was once a high quality iconic watch with a nice value proposition, but over time, it's been outpaced by others due to Omega's price increases. Even though luxury watches are inherently overpriced, the Speedmaster has been overtly so because of its moonwatch marketing. It simply doesn't make sense to own one if you care about value. Really, the reason I even have one is that I consider myself to be among the niche audience it actually makes sense for. Chronographs, particularly with hour totalizers, are my favorite style. I have smaller wrists and higher degrees in space-related sciences, and without doxing myself, I live in an area that's directly associated with the history of the Speedmaster as well. I'm an outlier though, with a highly specific bias towards this watch and everything it stands for. Most people, especially non-Americans, simply will not care about NASA and the extra cost of that history. The Speedmaster requires you to look at yourself and what you find interesting and important in a watch. Do you actually care about the story associated with it, or were you convinced to care? It's an important distinction, and one that could potentially save you a lot of money if you understand the answer. But that's just my admittedly biased opinion. How do all of you feel about the Speedmaster? Do you feel it sits in the correct place in the market or not? And if you found this discussion into the external factors and marketing costs that contributed to a watch's price, consider watching my video here, where I explain all of the ways watch companies try to manipulate you into buying and spending more on watches through marketing, sales tactics, and more. Thank you for taking the time to watch.